Hey everybody, this is Rydo, and we're back to another live stream of Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel and video game news. Let's hop in. Today is Friday, September 23rd. Starting about an hour later, just feeling it out basically as far as what is the right time that I feel like I want to stream. Apparently we've got some more quests around this XYZ Synchro XYZ Festival. I haven't been playing any of this really off screen so much. I think I maybe played a little bit after the stream on Wednesday just to get some daily quests done, but that's as much as I actually engaged with it. So if I get wins, I still should be fine. If I get a bunch of losses and they're really slow to get the losses, that might kind of suck. So win a duel in the exhibitions and activate a spell card in the exhibitions seem to be the new missions that we have here. And I guess there's nothing else to do, so we'll just hop in. For the accountability section, I will say I am still playing Darksiders 3, and it is weird in some places. I don't know if I really got that many episodes recorded. Well, actually I think I probably got 5 or 6 episodes recorded yesterday, hour-long episodes, so that was probably a pretty good day, but it doesn't feel like you really accomplish much. Like, one of the bosses is this giant monster boss battle, at least the second part of it is, and it really just highlights how giant monster boss battles never really work in video games, and it just turns into a gimmick or a cutscene. And this one definitely just turned into a gimmick. The closest game that I think maybe accomplished giant monster boss battles was kind of the finishing moves of God of War, and maybe even God of War just in general. Talking about the original series, not I think more than the remaster, rebooted series. I suppose you would call God of War the Dad of War series that's coming out still now, a reboot of the original series. Although, in all fairness, I'm kind of making just a huge assumption there, also, because I don't know for a fact whether anything. Well, I really don't know anything about God of War. I may have played it for like an hour at most, but I may never have played God of War at all. And certainly, a lot of the actions in God of War end in QuickTime events. So, and Darksiders 3 doesn't have any QuickTime events, and maybe it wouldn't. It does occur to me that there's a chance if they experimented with getting rid of the strong attacks on the Y button and then use the Y button instead for perhaps a very underutilized defense button where you could just go into a defense mode and not take any damage and just gain yourself a breather. That might be better than having the Y button have these slow wind up strong attacks and then really not having any enemies that are slow enough that you could use the wind up slow strong attacks on, unless you're supposed to dodge an attack to get the invincibility window to do a strong attack. Maybe that is the trick. But yeah, there's 4 hollows in Darksiders 3. Once you get the 4th one, that unlocks the 4th side puzzle area in the void, based around the hollows' abilities and powers. Mostly they're transition powers that let you go to different areas. And at the end of each of the void's puzzle section, all 4 of the puzzle sections, 1 for each hollow, there is a final battle. And the battles at the end of each individual section were fairly hard, but the battle at the final battle is just downright impossible. And I'm already playing on the easiest mode, so I can only assume that at some point I'm going to get a strengthened armor, something that could reduce a lot of damage. Otherwise, I have no idea how I'd possibly defeat that boss. And I don't know if you really have to defeat the boss. It may just be a really, really difficult fight that if you do it, you'll get some reward and maybe an achievement, but if you don't do it, you won't really miss the fact that you didn't do it. As for the main storyline, I keep getting offered distractions to leave the main storyline area, but you're really not doing anything. The game tells you at the beginning you're going to collect the 7 deadly sins, and you pretty much throughout the game are just chasing after the 7 deadly sins. They pretend like there would have been a way to maybe chase after a different deadly sin in a different order, but not really, because if you did try to play it in a different order, I think you would run into too many gatekeeping areas where you would need a specific hollow ability, and maybe the game gives you a hollow after every 2 deadly sins you defeat, so maybe there would have been a way you could have gone in a different order, but there's definitely probably a way in which you're going to run into a shortcut that is going to be blocked off by a hollow ability that you just do not have if you try to go out of order. And the entire world has all these shortcuts to interconnect itself as far as the main landmass, and it just feels very pointless. Like there's not really a reason that you would have that, or like right, so this guy's gonna activate his thing almost certainly at some point. If I do this, I banish a card, that'll give me a token. But the game definitely comes off as a little too monotonous. Far too often I'm just hitting XXX, XXX, even for an action video game. You are just mashing the same X button over and over again. And there's really nothing extra to say or do about Darksiders 3, so in what is going to be a very abrupt accountability section, I think I just have to end there. It's just more of the same. It's going to be very weird trying to get back to Breath of the Sky, but I really should play Breath of the Sky and try and finish that game. But it is going to be odd to finish Darksiders 3, which is based on the Darksiders series. At least 1 and 3 are heavily based on an Ocarina of Time type game, although Darksiders 3 I think starts to skew more towards being action and less towards adventure and puzzles and collectibles. There's just less of that in 3. It just makes the game feel unpolished or unfinished, which I suspect it was. Like, very possibly due to no fault of its own. It probably was stuck in a development hell of sorts just because THQ was going bankrupt, and THQ Nordic then had to take a couple of years to become Embracer Group to then acquire THQ's licenses. Just that extra year alone of people not being employed anymore, not working on the game, I imagine hurt it. Uh, yeah. Yeah, it is really setting itself up to be a mediocre, a middle-of-the-line game, when I really had hoped for it to be a much greater game. And we've had a couple of other Zelda-like games on PC, like Tunic and such, but there's never really been anything that's established itself as this is going to be the PC competitor to Zelda games. I also have a concern that even when you see Breath of the Wild getting rid of its puzzles and adventures, it's dungeons at least, and potentially having less puzzles, and definitely having a lot more fighting. I am a little concerned that the trend tends to be that level design and puzzle design and dungeon design are becoming a lost art in favor of just cramming a game with more and more enemies to grind on, turning it into an MMO. And at a certain point, Diablo established a line in the sand. The very first Diablo game established a line in the sand saying, if you want to make an action game where you're just going to click the left mouse button over and over again, and you're going to have procedurally generated dungeons, and you're going to have procedurally generated enemies, and procedurally generated weapons that just have slightly more damage, so the next weapon you get does 10% more damage than the weapon you currently have. If you want to make that kind of game, that's a Diablo-like. That's a totally different experience. You can't really go backwards from that and say, alright, well, we're going to take the laziness that was excusable in Diablo by having nothing be handcrafted or bespoke, which is not even true. The boss battle arenas, for the most part, are handcrafted dungeons and areas, but the hallways, the vast majority of dungeons are procedurally generated. But yeah, I can excuse it in a game like Diablo because that's really what it was selling itself as in the first place, is that you were going to not have the most polished experience ever, but you were going to be able to play this game mindlessly forever and just see the numbers go up on the Skinner box over and over again. But I can't excuse Darksiders for being like that or becoming more like that. At a certain level, Darksiders also being a 3D action-adventure game, it fails in its enemy placement as much as it fails in its level design. So whoever was making the levels did not make the walls and the caves big enough for there to actually be even a single enemy in there that you would fight. So very often you're just pegging somebody against a wall, pegging an enemy against a wall, and just beating on them, and if they have a defense stance, they'll go in the defense stance because that's the only thing they can do. And then they'll wait for a second and maybe try to attack you, which gives you an opening to attack them some more. But very often, if you're fighting even a medium sized enemy, you will try to do a full combo, which a full combo won't even kill the weakest of enemies in most cases, and then you'll try to do that second combo and they'll be in the defense stance. Well, yeah, like I was saying, I guess 6 months ago, though, I don't think I really have a lot to say about Darksiders 3, and I think that probably uh, is going to be the case when I finish the game, which I may be closer to finishing the game. I kind of expected there to be a second enemy, but it really does feel like you are just going to defeat the 7 deadly sins, and that's it. And I've defeated 4 or 5 of them already. Insomniac Games here on Twitter says that Spider-Man Miles Morales is coming to PC this fall and is available to wishlist today, which I guess the question to ask there is it coming to Steam? Yes. Yep. I am getting a decent amount of victories this way. I will just take it. We're at 4,000. We really only need to get to 11,000. So it does seem very doable that we could get up to even 22,000. Let's see. GameDeveloper.com put out an update to an article that we haven't even talked about. Ninja Theory has stated it as only using the AI technology for prototyping, and it does not intend to replace human actors. They're using some kind of AI voice tech, which it's kind of expensive to get the license to good AI, like voice tech, the good text-to-speech stuff, particularly if you have any hope whatsoever of it being able to emote in a certain way and to be programmed in an easy way to be emotable, if that's the right word. And see, I just don't see there being a particular reason why you would bother to use a text-to-speech and pay that license. Like that seems to me like an example of a producer, director, or publisher that is particularly stupid and wants to hear what a character might sound like early in development, when you easily could just have no text there and most people would be fine with that, or you could even have employees stand in as voice actors and do some lines. Now maybe, I guess, if Ninja Theory was part of some fairly strict voice actor union, there might be a reason that you couldn't just say bring in an intern or a QA tester or the animator themselves to voice lines. Almost always it's the animator themselves that would voice the lines, if anybody would voice the lines. At a certain level, we may very well start to see AI voice tech replace not the main characters in games, but replace a lot of NPC characters. A lot of people that have only one line of dialogue. There are definitely some NPC characters in Darksiders 3 that they gave several voice actors the exact same line of dialogue and just said, say these 5 things, and when the character walks up to that person, they'll say one of those 5 things. I believe the Watch Dogs 2 game was one of the, at least Watch Dogs 2. I don't know if I can name another game. I believe they did have some kind of voice technology, because the NPC characters that they were randomly generating seem to have also some procedurally generated fake voices to them. which honestly it could have just been the same 5 voice actors with pitch shifting and changes to change the way the voices sound. Because honestly, if you did pitch shift a voice, you can make it sound more feminine high or more masculine low fairly easily. But yeah, eventually I think everything will be artificial intelligence, just right up to the point where everybody loses a job and there's barely 10% of all of society is employable. Which, I mean, you can definitely have a society like that. Like, societies don't have to just be the way they have been in the past. There could be a world where we just have a universal basic income type by default, and highly skilled artisan people, or those people who really want to struggle and fight to keep their jobs, would still be capable of finding jobs. Yeah, and I doubt we'd actually get to a point where it's only 10% of people in a society or of the workforce is actually capable of finding a job. There'd just be too many people that would try to start their own jobs, and they would be these kind of laid back, oh, I run a bakery and I work just a few hours overnight, and then when I run out of bread, I close up shop, and then I have the rest of the day to go fishing and just enjoy myself. Which that was what jobs were not that long ago. You're talking 50, 60 years ago. There were definitely people that ran hardware stores, ran little shops. You don't even have to go 50, 60 years ago. If you just remember what a Radio Shack looked like in its final days, it really was just 1 or 2 people inside the Radio Shack just kind of goofing off, waiting for maybe 1 customer a day to actually come in and buy something. It's only with the more recent ideas of productivity has to be to the max, and we have to squeeze every single ounce of effort and work out of every single employee. But here I am going into an economics rant. Let's just start going through the video game news instead. Let's see. Do we want to really swap here? Well, we'll swap just for silliness sake, but none of these loner decks I've noticed really seem to help you XYZ synchro summon. Probably because I don't understand how to XYZ synchro summon. There is potentially something still wrong with my system as far as games coming out on the wishlist, because Return to Monkey Island here, which notably is a big game that I should have really seen, I had to click a link specifically to bring up this page. Maybe it would have been in the list of new games today since it came out on the 19th, but it must have come out right after I streamed. $25 for this new Monkey Island game. It is being received very positively, which I think also just highlights that the Streisand effect of complaining about people online complaining about the visuals of your game is just not necessary. It's just not something that needs to happen. I should just let people play the game and see the finished product before you bother to complain about any complaints. Oh, I guess maybe I could have pendulum affected this to get a different card. I guess looking at these screenshots, I can say it looks like there's some new characters and we're going to some familiar places, but there probably is going to be different puzzles. A lot of these characters are also familiar though, so I'd say you're talking 60-70% familiar returning characters and maybe 30% new characters. Like particularly this screenshot seems to be new characters. Let's see what this does. Destroying that card. Put it here. So now I should be able to pendulum summon it back, I think. I also watched the first episode of Cyberpunk Edgerunners. There's not really a lot to say about it so far. It looks like one of these animes that doesn't look as bad as you might think from Netflix. It doesn't come off as some of the highest like Ghost in the Shell movie style of animes either. In the first episode, it really is just kind of establishing, telling a story that is based off of the Cyberpunk video game, which I think kind of constrains it compared to what an anime left to its own devices would want to do. Because they do seem very much like it is a series that is going to be constrained to being very much connected to the Night World and the Cyberpunk story. It's not something like Cyberpunk 2077 presents this different anime in this different world. This is a spin-off story. Very noticeably, the character that I don't think you even really see in the first episode, Lucy, has been perhaps slandered in part by Kotaku articles calling her an underage loli, but every time I see her, any fan art of her, she's never depicted in any way as being a loli, as underage. And storyline wise, it seems to be very much that the male main protagonist, who is really the only character I saw in the first game, in the first episode, is younger than this Lucy character is. But yeah, there seems to be a level of fandom that is enthralled with this Lucy character. And there definitely seems to be some Rule 34 porn drawn around her as a character. And at a certain level, I think Edgerunners definitely encourages that, because in the first episode there's definitely a level of just lack of shame amongst the characters and the animators of the show. There's lots of just here's a quick flash of nudity or other sex happening. There's just a lot of people running around kind of in public in the first 5 scenes, I would say, or basically in the first 5 minutes of the first episode, you're seeing someone in public looking at VR porn and being serviced by a robotic device, and that is in line with the immaturity level of Cyberpunk 2077. Anyways, so I imagine the game let go of any reins or leash as far as how far they could go, the animators and the anime creators could go, and so by the game giving the anime creators permission to go crazy, they probably went a little bit even crazier than the game does. But yeah, Edgerunners definitely seems like it's a mature audience, or it's targeting a mature audience in a somewhat immature way, in the same way that Cyberpunk 2077 does. So, know what you're getting into, I imagine. The bigger issue, I think, and it's basically a shame, in my opinion, is that Cyberpunk 2077, from what I've heard, the actual game, years later, is still completely broken and just has all kinds of bugs and glitches in it. And despite that, they're managing to hit 1 million concurrent players, just because of advertising. And that is where the problem of any art being allowed to thrive simply because you can advertise it fairly well is disheartening, to say the least. I wish people would have better taste. Alright. Just gonna see if I can destroy this card and then destroy this card. Well, that didn't work. Video Games Chronicle articles. We briefly looked at this in the last stream. Logitech has announced this G Cloud handheld with Xbox and GeForce Now support. I'm fairly certain it's an Android handheld. It kind of doesn't matter what it is because it's selling itself for $349. Clearly there isn't a direct connection between Xbox here, because if there was, it would be weird for it to support Xbox streaming, which I think is really what it supports, not every Xbox game. There's no CD drive here or Blu-ray drive that you can plug into to play a game off discs. And maybe you could install games through Xbox Live, but being, I think, an Android device, I think they really are just talking about the streaming service, which is not the same thing, certainly. Alright. Just end the turn there. And so the things I complained about are still the same. The price is ridiculously high. Microsoft at some point might make a device like this. Like, I don't see a reason why PlayStation or Microsoft couldn't say, hey, let's get back into the handheld market and make our own custom handheld that looks a lot like the Steam Deck and try and compete with the Steam Deck. Because you can have the advantage of a PlayStation specific device or a Xbox specific device not really being so ambitious to actually play any PC game at all, and being more optimized for just PlayStation Network or Xbox Live. But this device won't be at it, and any device at $350 when you can get a cheap Steam Deck at $350 won't beat it. By far, I'd say get the low-level Steam Deck version if you can only afford that much. But honestly, you should get the mid-tier Steam Deck version. The buttons are in the wrong place as far as just this vertical alignment too. This is one of those devices that in previous decades I might keep an eye on to see if it fails miserably. There definitely were a few devices that failed really badly and then they were on clearance. But the odds nowadays of clearance is getting really cheap or fairly low, because if people don't want to buy the device locally, a shop just sells it online or sells it to somebody that'll sell it online for still a good price, and there's too many people that think they can scalp things. So yeah, best case scenario, I'd say maybe $175 if this failed miserably would be the best price you'd get for it. And even at that, you have to hope that there's a decent hacking community that would jailbreak the Android operating system and give you potentially a setup in which you could still do the default things of playing GeForce Now and Xbox games, but also run emulation software for an emulation software device and a streaming device at $175. It might be worth it. Let's see, moving on. Video Games Chronicle says Xbox's September update includes a library revamp and new storage options. Yeah, this noticeably looks fairly similar to the Steam library layout, but at a certain level, everything is just going to be horizontal bar, vertical bar, horizontal bar, vertical bar. That's pretty much all it has. Technically, I guess this would be a 2D grid. As far as storage options go, I assume that's you can plug in a hard drive and back up games to a hard drive. And then you can also program custom button colors on Elite controllers, which I guess that's maybe all the buttons, or maybe just the button in the center that lights up. It may just be the button in the center that lights up. So a little surprising that you do have that light up LED in the center of the controls, but at a certain point you almost have to have a light up LED on some point, so having only one in the center is probably your best bet. But you also can't turn that off in any settings, which that's a little weird. Keep on losing, keep on playing. Let's see. Apparently Dark Souls 3's PC servers are offline again. They were recently brought back online after 7 months of downtime. They are now offline due to an unspecific problem which is being investigated. Yeah. So I wouldn't expect a lot of faith of ever being able to play Dark Souls 3 online again. They probably just don't care about it enough to put the support into it needs. I heard Splatoon 3's networking code is pretty bad too, and that has been specifically a problem with all Nintendo games as far as trying to play it online. Which, yeah, I don't know if it really is worth it to have the online service for what Nintendo really offers, even at its cheaper price, because most of the games online services suck. And there really is no single player worth mentioning in Splatoon 3, so yeah, just figuring that out or being told that, it helps me eliminate any chance of trying to play the Splatoon series. Which is a little bit of a shame, but not that much. I really am not going to cry over spilt milk about not being able to play a somewhat kid-friendly first-person shooter paint game. That's just going to be mostly player versus player. I've also, same reviewer talking about the game said that it seems that the amount of people who have really gotten good at Splatoon is fairly high, so even someone who is a decent player in Splatoon 2 may find themselves struggling. Interesting. So I should have placed this one down on the field. Moving on, the FIFA 23 web app is now live, offering early access to Football FUT 23. So I talked about this. Cyberpunk CD Projekt Red says that Cyberpunk 2077 is now attracting 1 million players daily. Senior developers thanking players for a second chance. Honestly, though, I can't help but assume that people giving the game a second chance are going to not make it to the end. And this is Cyberpunk 2077 from the game, and this is the main male character from Edge Runners. So they've merged two animations here. And notably, like, one of the first sequences in Edge Runners, in the first episode, is literally just a callback to the idea of the lady being going crazy in her cyberpunk body in the trailer that was shown many years before Cyberpunk 2077 even came out. And that teaser trailer basically had nothing to do with any of what Cyberpunk 2077 really became. But it was just a slow pan circling around this lady, following bullets, bouncing off of her, and her having these spider-like arms. And in Edge Runners, they show a more action-oriented, faster-paced, more anime style of showing a similar scene in which it's a muscly guy this time, just actively trying to kill as many police or security forces as possible, and succeeding fairly well with some kind of augmentations. I see Sniper Rangers on the chat. He says hello, so I'll say hello back. But I have to say, it does probably say something bad on top of all the other problems of Cyberpunk 2077 that I cannot name who this character is. All I know is the Keanu Reeves character, and I can't even tell you who his name is. I know you kind of pick your own appearance in Cyberpunk 2077, but there aren't any characters that people seem to be super happy about. Like, I have no idea who this person is in this Phantom Liberty trailer. Like, shouldn't I know the name of some of these characters? Alright. At the very least, I should have some like feeling of familiarity with the characters and the way they appear. I should have seen pictures of them. There should have been fan art, or there should have been some level of love there. It's just not. Okay. Trying to play here. Let's see. The Splinter Cell remake apparently will update the game's storyline for a modern audience. The game will use the original game as its foundation, it says, which basically means we have no idea what a Splinter Cell remake is going to be. I mean, at a certain level, I feel like the Splinter Cell series was pretty modern of a tale anyways. It's hardly a story of somebody sailing a boat across the ancient Egyptian waters or anything like that. It was high-tech, like espionage and political thrillers. What has changed in 30-40 years even of time as far as high-tech political espionage thrillers? Nothing really. Just the technology may be more high-tech, but the corruption in politics and the espionage in general is pretty much exactly the same. And every time I hear a game company claim that it's going to be updated or changed in any ways, I have to just assume that it's because of some level of censorship, and I just don't know what level of censorship in Splinter Cell you'd really be pushing. And I have to assume it's probably going to be something that pisses at least half of the United States population off, in that they're going to say that the bad guy in this Splinter Cell remake is either a Donald Trump analogy or a MAGA group of Trump supporters analogy. That would make the most sense. I don't think there's any adult content in the Splinter Cell series that would need to be edited out. Speaking of a desire to censor things, there was this Hatsune Miku concert that was going to happen in the West, and the concert wanted to edit something, and they've come out and directly said that they've wanted to edit something or censor something. They didn't say exactly what that something was, and the original creators of the concert said no, like we're not going to let you make changes and edit for such a ridiculous reason, because this literally is just a concert that's going to be showing a few like images on the screen in the background. There's speculation that the images they want to censor is just one of the younger looking characters, but it's not like the younger looking characters is even in anything explicit. They're fully clothed and appropriately dressed. So even that speculation doesn't really make that much sense, unless we've just gotten down to the point where they don't want any anime depictions of kids or younger looking characters ever in any situation, which it sometimes feels like that is the next step. Like, and unfortunately, there's really just no way to not believe in slippery slope arguments anymore, because it's been shown that too often that slippery slope arguments do seem to now hold weight. Okay. Change that to battle position, and then change that to defense position. I guess we're looking for more ghost trick cards. It almost feels like there is a strategy here that would work. But it does seem incredibly complicated as a strategy. Moving on, Video Games Chronicles says Dying Light 2's first story DLC has again been delayed. Bloody Ties will now arrive in November, a month later than previously planned. I don't even know if you really should describe this DLC as a story DLC, because it doesn't kind of really feel like it is going to be so much a story DLC as it is going to mostly just be a arena in which you fight people. Maybe you'll get a tiny bit of DLC story narrative here around it, but yeah, I think the vast majority of the actual gameplay is just that. Right. Dying Light 2, I suppose, is an interesting experiment in delaying a game to get it to be better. Maybe not delaying a game enough to get it as good as people want it to be. I don't think that there is anywhere as rabid of a fan base around Dying Light 2 as there was Dying Light 1. And that may just be a timing issue, really. That Dying Light 2 was never going to possibly have the kind of fandom that Dying Light 1 had. Guess we activate this and then end the turn. But it comes off to me like it's not really being punished for its many delays around Dying Light 2. It's gotten off very light as far as delays, whereas if you compare it to, say, what was almost certainly rushed Saints Row reboot, compare that game, had the Saints Row reboot been delayed for 6 months to a year later and been a much better game than it was, or than it seems to be, then I think maybe you'd have a better experience. And honestly, particularly around the pandemic development time, I think that is the future for this year and probably next year and maybe even the year after that, is that we're going to see a lot of games that get delayed and come out and they're still just mediocre, and that's going to be the best we get, which arguably makes a great argument for prices to go down for games. And a price adjustment could potentially fix a lot of problems around a lot of games. Dying Light 2 Deluxe Edition was $10 cheaper than every other Deluxe Edition for every other game. That would help. If Saints Row was a $15 game instead of a $60 game, nobody would complain about it at all, although $30 game is probably much more close to what would be realistic. I'm gonna probably lose here. Moving on, Video Games Chronicle says GoldenEye developers to talk and meet fans at EGX London on Saturday. EGX, what is EGX? I recognize the letters, but it's been a long time since I've heard EGX. Extended Game Expo, I would guess is what it stands for. Or European Game Expo, that might also make sense. Which that reminds me, G4 is continuously losing talent at this point, where Kevin Pereira has left Attack of the Show. Now, Kevin Pereira or Adam Sessler leaving their specific shows was buffered to begin with as being something that was planned all along, but we are far, far from the point where anybody is going to actually believe that the plan for Kevin Pereira to leave at this exact moment. They more than likely are literally just laying off everybody who's getting paid a lot, and that it is probably just they're going down the payroll chart and saying who's getting paid the most, who can we lose, let's fire everybody, let's lay off everybody. Kevin Pereira, I don't think has done anything of note since the G4 reboot has happened, and that's on top of the fact that the G4 reboot really hasn't done much of note, and definitely hasn't done anything that's been positively received. He obviously 10 years later is just probably too old and just not with the kids, as it were, to really be the host of Attack of the Show. I don't know if you can even really do something like Attack of the Show anymore, but you needed a lot of fresh blood, certainly, and they tried to do that, but you needed somebody to be really popular also at the same time. And same is kind of true for Adam Sessler, is that you needed new fresh blood to be video game critics, and I'm not sure that they really accomplished that. But yeah, I heavily suspect we'll hear Adam Sessler is gone within the week. There is the G4 reboot as a concept has had a problem right at the beginning, because they didn't need to reboot G4, they needed to reboot X-Play and then focus on X-Play and then focus on video games, and then a year anniversary into them rebooting X-Play, that would be the time that you would potentially bring back Attack of the Show. And if X-Play had succeeded and been rebooted on a smaller scale, then you potentially don't just bring back X-Play, but you also bring back some of the other lesser known G4 series, a lot of which were not that expensive to really run in the first place. Like the shows that were just showing cutscenes of video games, for instance, and that were getting rerun over and over again. Like, those kinds of shows could have been brought back very cheaply and could have filled in the roster as far as just what kind of content. inherently my love for G4 though comes from my insomnia. So I was awake in the middle of the night watching like X-Play and things like that, and watching reruns and seeing the same thing over and over again. And that is in line with really the only reason anybody's watching any kind of cable TV. It's because there just was less choice. Now there's way more choice. So I really don't have a reason that I would just watch G4 when I could be listening to a podcast or watching anything that YouTube is suggesting to me. And I never really watched Attack of the Show, but that concept I think could work. In fact, Attack of the Show probably should work more than even X-Play coming back, but it's going to take more effort than it could make in the money. Unless Google themselves or YouTube themselves or Twitch themselves were straight up paying Kevin Pereira to do an Attack of the Show and highlight other YouTubers' content, which there might have been an avenue around that. I could see X-Play on Twitch being funded by Twitch, and talking about games, but also highlighting other streamers who are playing that game at the time. That there might be something to that. Of course, Twitch sounds like they are falling apart financially. Speaking of weird things, I suppose, although Twitch falling apart is really not that weird, I saw this Video Game Donkey video of in which he says he's going to become a game publisher, and he's got this Big Mode publishing company. I saw it. It didn't come off 100% as himself being silly, but I can see why some people would just assume that everything on the Video Game Donkey channel is a joke. Perhaps he should have started a Big Mode YouTube channel and then tried to put the announcement both on Video Game Donkey and Big Mode as a YouTube channel. But I think to a certain level he is serious. And immediately as you start becoming serious, you stop being known by your YouTube alias or your video game alias, and so they've got his actual name, Jason Gastro, and you have an actual picture of an actual human, which he doesn't really show. If anything, I guess Video Game Donkey might be the only successful non-face cam person I can think of on YouTube. But yeah, I think he does want to be a publisher. Does he have the money to be a publisher? Does he have the skill to be a publisher? Those are all great questions, of which I suspect we won't be given immediate answers to. And I can't help but assume that a YouTuber wanting to be a publisher is as bad of an idea as most other people that want to be publishers. Because I don't know if I believe that Video Game Donkey has the wherewithal to run a publishing company, has the lawyers and the contract makers to make good publishing deals. He is definitely coming from it from a perspective of, if I'm just a really nice publisher who makes great deals with the developers, then the developers will make great games. And while that would be nice if that's the case, some games just fail. Some developers just turn in crap and take the money and run. Most video games go late and need more money. There is kind of a reason why a lot of publishers come off as these manipulative jerks that end up owning all the rights to the game and not paying out like dividends and things like that, and promised rewards to developers. And it isn't 100% just because all publishers are evil. So I hope his business succeeds, but if I was a game developer, I would try every other avenue before I try what is effectively stunt casting by working with a YouTuber to be a publisher. For YouTubers in general, it's not a terrible idea. Like, if you had PewDiePie as a publisher instead of just having some other publisher, another development company, make his two kind of bad PewDiePie games, he could be making money without having to work directly on those projects. And PewDiePie in particular, being the most successful YouTuber, almost certainly has the most funding to become a publisher. I could see Captain Sparkles also doing that. Inherently though, this also implies that Video Game Donkey is probably not super interested in doing the Video Game Donkey thing as much as he once was. So I wouldn't be surprised if we start to see a slowdown in that avenue, and we see less Video Game Donkey videos, which isn't really that big of a loss. He has very polished but very short videos in which he just is doing the same character over and over again, talking about video games. Moving on, FIFA 23 soundtrack has its full track list announced if you want to check that out at Video Games Chronicles. Microsoft CEO says he's very confident in the Activision deal gaining approval, which, I mean, what would you say other than that? Like, CEOs are supposed to be BS artists that are constantly inspiring confidence. Hey, let's see what this does. Yeah, attach an XYZ monster. Attach that as an XYZ material. Interesting. See, I'd win if I had 10 things attached, but I don't. I'm not likely to actually get that far. Let's continue our momentum. It's not been particularly fast today. Oh. The Epic Games Store's next free titles have been confirmed. Runbow and Drone Racing League Simulator will be free next week. I feel like Drone Racing League Simulator wasn't particularly a good game. But I could be thinking about any number of other drone simulation games. Apparently Ed Sheeran is releasing a Pokemon collaboration song next week, which I guess that's video game news, sorta. The new Pokemon game is coming out fairly quickly in the next couple of weeks, and there's a lot of talk that Detective Pikachu 2 might be close to being released in theaters, and that the Mario movie may be close to being released in theaters. Yeah, if all else fails, win on a connection failure. And at this point, I think my network connection is set up pretty well, so if it is my router causing these connection failures, I have no desire to try and fix that. I'd much prefer that it happen more often. This is one of those stories where NVIDIA's CEO says declining GPU prices are a thing of the past. It's a great example of a story that where just because somebody says it doesn't mean it's true. I heavily suspect that we are going to see a stabilization of video card prices getting back down to a more realistic $199 to $699 range of video cards, or we're just going to start to see fewer and fewer people rapidly trying to get the newest and the best video cards. And inherently we're going to probably, for a while, if you look at consoles, we're not going to see a lot of games really demanding higher graphics cards. Like, almost no game has ever been designed for a PC top tier graphics card GPU specs. Anyways, like, there've been a couple of games like Control that show off ray tracing and all, but I don't think we have another ray tracing gimmick that people are actually going to care about. And ray tracing really hasn't been something that the consoles, the PS5 and the Xbox Series X, can fully embrace in every single game. So I imagine we potentially are going to have a 5 to 10 year path in which games are going to only get incrementally better because of better programming, and they're mostly just going to be targeting the equivalent of graphics cards that would be equivalent to what the PS5 and the Xbox Series X has. Now, NVIDIA obviously doesn't want that, and they want to continuously push people towards buying more and more graphics cards like crazy, and they want to make up for the fact that now there's very little reason to even think for a second that having a graphics card would get you any kind of cryptocurrency. So you're not going to crypto mine with even the new NVIDIA 4000 series, or 40 series, I guess is what they're calling it. So there's highly likely to be a glut of graphics cards, 2080s, 2070s, 2060s. If I see a 2060 that looks like it's a decent price, I probably would buy a couple of them, just if they were cheap. And like, yeah, 2060, 2070, 2080 will set you into a very nice position. I have a 2080 in my computer, and barring any weird bugs like I was having earlier this year with setup and such, it has worked flawlessly, and I'm just not buying brand new games that would justify going any higher in price or getting any more graphics cards or a more powerful graphics card. There is also a highly real possibility that we're going to see the swing shift over to ATI graphics cards anyways, because ATI is what's in the Xbox Series X and the PlayStation 5 anyways. So yeah, well, right now buying an ATI probably isn't your best bet. I wouldn't be surprised if the next announcement for the next series of ATI graphics cards does start to make more sense. ATI hasn't really been trying to compete very hard in the past years as far as PC gaming. But yeah, I could definitely see that changing now that Nvidia has basically told everybody that they're going to plan on ripping them off with extremely expensive cards. Moving on, the Super Mario movie's first trailer will be shown next month. At that point, I guess we'll get a general idea of what it's going to look like at New York Comic Con. I assume the trailer will also show us what Mario sounds like. That way we can end any controversy around I think Chris Pratt is playing Mario, and we'll end or confirm any controversy whether Chris Pratt doesn't sound like Mario or does sound like Mario. Like, arguably, the first step is that Chris Pratt just has to not sound like Chris Pratt. It's the second step after that point when you start to worry about him not sounding exactly like the Mario you remember. And I wonder who would be doing the voice acting of Mario in Japan when the movie airs in Japan, which almost certainly it would. Probably still Chris Pratt. I bet they don't dub it. I bet it is a subtitled English movie just with Japanese subtitles popping up, or maybe not even subtitles in the movie theater. And they just assume that it'll be a kids movie speaking simple English words, and since most Japanese people know simple English words fairly easily and can speak English, they could probably just sit through the movie without subs. So it'll be very interesting, I guess, if the Japanese audiences see the Mario movie and say Mario doesn't sound like Mario. Let's see. Moving on, Modern Warfare 2 beta crashes on Xbox consoles are being investigated. So, I guess it is an actual beta, unlike many other betas where actual bugs do exist and you're actually trying to suss out where the bugs are. Let's see. The Apex Legends studio Respawn has called for an end to developer harassment. We have a zero-tolerance policy for threats and harassment for our developers. So, again, I imagine this is going to be a Streisand's effect. I've heard no stories, lately at least, around Apex Legends developers being harassed. And so, yeah. These kinds of stories never make the developers themselves look good. Saying, guys, please stop picking on me. Because the truth is, while there is probably some small percentage of people who are giving negative feedback of some level, whether it really is harassment or not, it is an insignificantly small number of people. Compared to everything else, compared to the number of players in the actual player base. Yeah, I don't know if there really is a way to come out against being harassed. I think you say nothing. I think you just block the people. I think you just have to create a crazy person crank file where you're saying this is a crazy person. They've made threats against me. We don't believe they're credible. Maybe you even say, hey, local police, give us an email address where we can send these emails or these posts to the local police if they want to investigate it. and see if there is some action that really needs to be taken. But I don't think you come out publicly around that. Inherently, if you feel like you're being harassed by an unorganized group of people, that is to say that there's some random person who's upset about something Apex Legends related in the United States, and then there's a random person in Europe, and they're not talking to each other and they're not coordinating anything. They're just all upset for either the same reason or different reasons. Doesn't that mean that the central point that's causing this upsetness is the Apex Legends developers inherently? So if you think everybody hates you, you're probably being paranoid. But if you have evidence that everybody hates you, you probably need to look inside and think about, like, what am I doing that's making so many people hate me? But you get into past what I'd even call a tinfoil hat conspiracy level of thinking, into just a straight up paranoid way of thinking when you're complaining that other people are complaining about you. Yeah, paranoia really is, I guess, the word for it. Developers have just developed incredibly thin skin and paranoia, and they are being treated. They are around too many SJWs or selectivists, or they are themselves SJWs and selectivists, and they apparently have just lived fairly, like, sheltered lives for people who are supposed to be professionals and are supposed to be running a professional business. I wouldn't even respond on Twitter. If I was the Apex Legends Twitter person and somebody put a death threat against me, I wouldn't even respond to it. I wouldn't say we have a zero tolerance policy. First of all, a corporation saying we have any policy doesn't mean anything to anybody outside of that corporation. And it really shouldn't mean much to even people inside the corporation, because those policies are literally only applied when the corporation wants to apply them. But yeah, corporations like to pretend like they have authority, or some kind of legal authority, and that their policies are anything other than just words. But yeah, if I was running Apex Legends Twitter, I wouldn't respond to it. I would block that person, and just be done with my day and move on. That there's nothing else you really can do and nothing else you really should do. If something really is dangerous or illegal, you flag it and you report it to Twitter, and you hope Twitter does something. If it feels really dangerous and like Twitter's not doing anything, which very possibly Twitter isn't doing anything, then you flag it and you put it in the crank file and email it to police. But yeah, you definitely do not engage. First rule is do not engage with crazy people. Do not engage with irate people. Another thing certainly people should realize is it is easier than ever to really screw over a company if you wanted to. Like to try and hack them, to file a complaint with the Better Business Bureau, as if that really does anything. If a person is really upset about something and smart, they're not just going to make threats against people. They're going to do something potentially that would be illegal, and you should just be more on the lookout for those actions more than anything. Moving on, Video Games Chronicle says a white Xbox Series X console has been spotted in a Logitech advertisement. That inherently doesn't mean there will be a white Xbox Series X. I kind of thought there already was, if you'd asked me. I wouldn't be surprised though if this is just a faceplate or they just painted it white. Although if they did paint something white, I don't know why then there's a bright pink on this microphone, which looks like a Blue Yeti microphone. Although the stand isn't quite right for that. Like, if they were just painting things white, I would think you could just paint this white because there's a white one here. And if you're looking for a contrast of white and pink, then why is there no contrast of white and pink on this lady? It's an oddly set up shot for sure. And if there is a controller here, it is just fading into the background. You can barely see maybe an outline there on that picture. A white version of the Xbox Series X doesn't really mean anything at all. Yeah. Destroy one monster special summon from an extra deck. Let's try that. Oh, that effect didn't work. Moving on. A new Bungie patent fuels a Destiny mobile speculation, which I think that probably is the direction that a game like Destiny is going. Although maybe this isn't going to exactly be a Destiny game, and maybe it'll just be a side game connected to Destiny. But yeah. What did they want with Destiny? They wanted a game with Destiny 1 that never needed a sequel. They failed miserably on that, and so are to Destiny 2. They wanted a game that people would just play over and over again, like people played Halo 1 and 2, but many years ago. And most of the Halo 1 and 2 players, I think, probably are playing Destiny if they're still playing anything. But yeah, they wanted to get just a continuously reoccurring income through microtransactions while giving minimal updates. That sounds a lot like a mobile game. And so had Destiny started as a mobile game, it would probably have worked. Going backwards to a mobile game, I don't think would work. The reason why the only game I've really stuck with on my cell phone is a game that is just constantly giving updates and constantly getting other people, not me, to spend microtransactions. It is because of that continuous updated content. But the lewd waifu game I play on my phone, Destiny Child, has way more story worth mentioning, I think, than Destiny does, because I cannot tell you word one of what the narrative of or the story is around Destiny 2. Like giant moon-shaped creatures was something in general about the Destiny 1 and 2 series, but that's all I could say. I think there was a white witch at some point that was also mentioned. I don't suspect that there really is much around Destiny that I would really like. Alright, moving on to the Gamatsu articles. We had a decent number of Video Games Chronicle articles, but not a lot really happening. We have a game called Gory, G-O-R-I, Cuddly Carnage for the PS5, PS4, Xbox Series, Xbox One, and Switch. Which apparently you're playing as cuddly little characters killing each other. Well, honestly, this looks more like it is a skateboarding, rocket boarding adventure with hack and slash elements as you're moving fast. Which I suppose there is a question as to whether you can get that to really work, whether a Jet Set Radio grinding skateboarding game can also have fighting mechanics that work, or are you going to inherently let's see, need to slow down to beat up on the enemies. Well, yeah, I do think Gory Cuddly Carnage could be something. Today definitely feels like a bit of a laid-back day. Something about Fridays always gives the feeling that it's a little bit more laid back. I'm just picking random cards here. Well, that didn't work the way I wanted it to. I'm probably lost here because of that. I think this might be our last game for today, too. Like, we made decent amount of progress. If I play a little bit on the weekend, I'll be fine. Although, I am effectively trying to promise something I cannot deliver, which is playing a little bit of Yu-Gi-Oh! Duel Masters and also playing Zelda Breath of the Wild, which I can only talk about and can't make any footage on it, and also working on my Raspberry Pi guest Wi-Fi router project, which I haven't worked on in probably a week or two, and working on playing Darksiders 3. Like, there's just no way I'm getting all of that done. I might get 2 of those things done over the weekend at most. So yeah, ambition is high, reality check is low. Moving on, Gamatsu says Xbox Game Pass adds Deathloop, Slam Rancher 2, Valheim, and more. There's a whole list here of games. Hard Space Shipbreaker, Beacon Pine, Slime Rancher 2, Spider Hook, Moon Cars or Moon Scars, Grounded full release, Let's Build a Zoo, Valheim, and Paw Patrol Grand Prix. And then several games are already available, and then several games are leaving on September 30th. Like AI to Somnium files. That's probably a great example of a game that probably didn't benefit that much by being on the Game Pass. Like the niche Japanese visual novel audience that would have played AI to Somnium files would have played it regardless, and it almost certainly didn't catch that many people's attention or new players. At a certain level, I almost assume that niche art only gains a new audience by the small numbers, by friends telling friends, or by there being what's the best way to say this? People are just bored with the mainstream stuff. Right, so we got all the daily quests done. We have a week to do this solo mode. We've gotten all the exhibitions done. We have more spell cards we'd have to activate, winning a lot more duels. The fact that it seems to say we've only won 3 seems inaccurate. I feel like I've won a lot more than 3 games. XYZ summoning, we still need to do a lot of that. And synchro summoning, we still need to do a lot more of that. But we made decent progress. Mostly, I'm looking at, we'll collect the pass stuff. Mostly what I'm looking at is over here, in the fact that we are like 1 victory away from getting this character, which means we're already kind of halfway to the point of getting all the gems, which I only really care about the gems, and then it's pretty much just gravy as far as getting legacy pack tickets and a festival title if we get all the way to 22,000. And I definitely don't feel that stress that I've felt in previous festivals where you were really struggling to win at all. Alright, but let's leave it there. Komatsu says a hyper cinematic narrative adventure game called 1000X Resist has been announced for Switch and PC, which he's seeing some Asian symbology here and a upward looking image, so I almost assume that this is some kind of future police state where you're trying to resist the bad guys, but maybe not. Maybe you're playing in some kind of military fighter against other people. The screenshot's really not telling us much of anything. Will you save the sisterhood or burn it to the ground? Shift through time, experience the past, present, and future, examine memories, identity, and inherited histories. Let's see what the trailer actually shows us. What does the phrase hyper cinematic really mean? Is a good question to ask. Relive the memories of a god. Yeah. Particularly for Asian games, when you see something that you might describe as hyper cinematic, it tends to be that the game is really just a low effort visual novel or walking simulator, and it's just super focused on visuals and nothing else. Or it's an MMO that's super focused on visuals. Like, even looking at this trailer, it does seem like you're half it seems like you're half seeing a horror game and then you're half seeing a mystery game. Resist a 1,000-year-old lie. says the trailer. Yeah. I would say the visuals here don't even look that good. Could be 1,000 cross resist. They love using X as cross in Japanese anime. So apparently, you're a watcher. You relive the memories of the All Mother and uphold her glory when your closest sister Fixer comes to you with a dangerous rumor, which I guess means your job is to censor the histories in favor of the sisterhood, and you're gonna potentially betray that so that you can reveal the truth. We already talked about an Iron Man game being announced. I don't think there's any trailer or anything still to show or to talk about. A game called Gunya Monsters launches December 4th for the PS5, Switch, and PC. Which, it's probably nothing. Although this is definitely a wild picture. It's a lot of cosplaying going on in the voice recording booth, apparently. But then the actual animation of the actual characters in the game are fairly uninteresting looking. And I guess these might be concept arts where this is more of the final product, and kind of feels like it's just a Splatoon clone. Yeah. And then you can almost assure yourself that it's a bad game when you see 2 different types of currency and a whole bunch of costumes. Yeah. Some really dead eyes in some of these characters. Yeah. Half dress-up game, half Splatoon game, half Minecraft game, just trying to throw a bunch of concepts together. And I don't think this would really work or gather my attention. A lot of screenshots, so at the very least I would say they're proud of what they've made. So there might be a slight level of extra polish to it. I'm not going to bother to watch that trailer though. Famitsu has its review scores for issue 1764, giving the Diofield Chronicle 32 out of 40, the Legend of Heroes Kira no Kisekai 2 Crimson Sins 33 out of 40, Taiko no Tatsujin Rhythm Festival 3 out of 40, 33 out of 40, and Valkyrie Elysium 33 out of 40. So everything fairly average, but overall a little bit better. Usually you see 32 or 8s across the board. There might be a slight power creep happening even in Famitsu, where we're starting to see 8s across the board, where maybe 10 years ago we would have seen 7s across the board for an average game. We're still not getting anywhere close to an average game getting 5s across the board. Legend of Heroes Trails of Cold Steel has another trailer for the Northern War debut trailer. What's funny is it often visually just goes in one eyeball and out the other, I guess, because I don't recognize any of these characters. So this is either an entirely different game, or this is an entirely different group of people, or I've just not been paying attention as to what the Legend of Heroes Trails of Cold Steel series is about compared to every other Trails game or Legend game, or games that have Legends or Trails in the name. House Flipper 2 has been confirmed for the PS5, Xbox Series, and PC. It has a gameplay trailer. I don't know if there really needed to be a House Flipper 2. Like, what was House Flipper 1 really missing? And does House Flipper 2 really fix that, or are we just getting what is very similar to like a Sims 2 that just has more furniture packs and layouts and designs of things? Like, it could be that the first House Flipper game really had only 10 to 20 houses, so House Flipper 2 may just give you 10 to 20 more houses. Painting brick is almost never the right move. Like, if you have brick and you hate brick, you should just put up some plaster or paneling or something over it and anchor it in a few places. That way when brick comes back into fashion, which it inevitably will, you don't have this painted brick that would have to then be scraped. And inherently, painting brick is kind of a great example of people not knowing what to do to fix their houses and just trying random things and hoping it works. It's not the worst mistake I imagine you could make to a house. It's not going to cause it to fall down immediately, but yeah, don't paint brick. Moving on, The Last of Hero of Nostalgia launches October 19th for PC, Xbox One, and Xbox Series. We'll leave it at that. The game The Valiant for PC launches October 19th. Scorn's prologue gameplay walkthrough and screenshots. We looked at this on Wednesday, and yeah, Scorn is still going with this HR Gigar visuals, but I don't think it's going to push it to an extreme that gets it like an adults only rating. I think it will have a lot of violence and gore, but will still magically, thanks to help of the publishers and relationships with consoles, I imagine it will end up on the Xboxes and PlayStations. Although we have definitely seen a couple of games where they totally were planning on coming out to consoles and had to edit things down to get on consoles or didn't get on consoles at all. Let's see, Dakar Desert Rally 80s Classic trailer is available if you want to check that out. I don't think I particularly care about a racing game enough to look at its trailer. PlayStation VR 2 Feel the New Real trailer is available if you want to check that out. We only have about 10 more Gematsu articles too. Atari Mania launches October 13th, which this oddly doesn't just seem like it's a collection of Atari games when I would almost certainly assume that it's a collection of Atari games. Remember, Atari went out of business and people swooped up to own the name Atari and own the rights to Atari games, which I would think I'm still a proponent of the idea of when a company goes bankrupt, its intellectual properties instead of its physical real world items. Just owning contracts and patents and saying you own source code to games that you didn't even make, I think that should all become public domain at that point. That part of the bankruptcy thing is that you must hand over all source code, or all source code is effectively public domain, so anybody could find it, steal it, reverse engineer it, whatever, to make their own Atari games. Let's see, Picross Season 8, or S8, has been announced for Switch. Picross still a big thing, particularly on Switch. Toho Shoujo Tale of the Beautiful Memories for Swift launches September 29th. Which kind of Toho game is this? It says it's a JRPG. Oddly, I don't think there really are that many JRPG Toho games. One of these days I'm going to figure out what the Toho series really means and why it seems to be this odd thing that so many different companies seem to be able to make so many spin-off games and use the idea of Toho. Like, if they just straight up said Toho was public domain, that would make sense to me. But yeah, this specific Toho game doesn't look that interesting. The game Wizorb is coming to Switch on October 6th. This is a fairly old game, and I don't know if it's particularly one that people care about. You almost would think that it's a pinball game, but I don't think it is. It is more of an Arkanoid game with extra elements. Which, it's surprising anything you do to an Arkanoid game could potentially make Arkanoid somewhat interesting to play. But I still don't think I would. I may very well own this game, come to think of it, and I'm not that enthusiastic to potentially playing it. Let's see. Death vs. Let It Die has its opening movie, and this looks crazy. You have these kind of like bee-like golden ladies, and then golden-faced people, and then you have a big fat guy in a wedding dress lady. So let's see what this opening cinematic looks like. And hopefully this is blurred enough that it doesn't get content ID claimed. You probably should jump around, just save times. Yeah, it looks like it's going to be a whole dance number. Now this doesn't really look like anything too related to Deathverse as a game. Deathverse Let It Die as a game. Yeah, it just looks weird. Yeah. So it's only until you get to the halfway point that you actually start to see some gameplay. At a certain level, this is probably what I think they kind of would have liked to do with Darksiders 3, or even Darksiders 2, is have a game where you are just constantly fighting enemies, and that's the only gameplay loop and the only thing that's interesting. About the game. But it doesn't work, really. The mindless button mashing, the mindless fighting in games, in MMOs, going on forever, that only works for a certain percentage of players and a certain type of player. It doesn't really work for me. I can do it for a while. I can go 60 hours playing some mindless gameplay, but eventually I want some story, some narrative. I don't want to just break my fingers mashing the same button over and over again. Moving on, Mario Strikers Battle League version 1.2.0 update is now available, which adds Pauline and Diddy Kong. Dragon Quest Treasures has a gameplay overview trailer if you want to check that out. Legend of Heroes Trail series sales have topped 7 million. That being said, the Trail series and the Legend of Heroes subtitle trails have several games in it, so the number would be 10 million or higher if it was a less niche Japanese RPG. Although arguably there might be a point where I should start looking at the numbers and seeing if the Legend of Heroes Trail series alone might be more relevant than playing the Final Fantasy series. Valkyrie Profile Lilith for the PS4 and PS5 has been delayed to December 22nd. These characters feel a little familiar, like they were drawn based on something else, because this guy kind of looks like Guts from the Berserk anime manga, and this girl feels familiar from something, and this monkey looks, I think, something like the Dragon Ball Z monkeys or the Dragon Ball monkeys. Although a monkey is a monkey. But maybe I'm just seeing a familiarity there that really isn't there. The Famitsu sales updates between 9.12 and 9.18 have been updated, showing, wow, for Switch, PS4, and PS5, taking the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th spot, Dragon Quest X, Rise of the Five Tribes. And that probably shows why there weren't that many games on sale last week. Nobody wanted to compete against any kind of Dragon Quest games. Dragon Quest is ridiculously popular. Now, noticeably for this week, even combined, Splatoon 3 is still, like, I'd say about twice as popular. It sold 500,000 units, and it's not even a new game, compared to selling maybe 250,000. And then other new games this week was Trinity Trigger, which sold 6,000 units, and then Fairy Fencer F Refrain Chord for the Switch, selling 2,500 about. Trinity Trigger for the PS4 is way down in the 20th position, and Fairy Fencer for the PS4 is way down in the 24th position. Trinity Trigger for the PS5 is way down at the 28th position. So Trinity Trigger totally getting screwed by releasing their game against Dragon Quest. This was definitely not a week to release a game in Japan. Hardware sales wise, we've got the Switch taking the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd spot, and then oddly you get a bump here in the Xbox Series S taking the 4th spot, selling 13,000 units, beating out the PlayStation 5, which maybe this is an indication that the PS5 and the PS5 Digital Edition is starting to run out of stock in Japan again. Like, for a long time they were just not available. Now it seems like they were available, and maybe they're starting to dry up again. The fact that there's such a big difference also between the Xbox Series X and the Series S either shows that people were willing to compromise for a cheaper Series S, or the stock was just way higher for the Series S, or there was maybe a sale or a bundle, which notably, instead of raising the prices in some regions for the PlayStation 5, there should have been a bundle in which the price stays the same but they give away games, or the price goes up a little bit but then they bundle with a game so you can't compare apples to apples. PS4 literally only sold 12 units according to these numbers. Let's see, a Gematsu article here. Guns on Darkness has a Tokyo Game Show interview with Shoji Meguro, which this game doesn't strike me as being one of the big names of games. I don't recall it even being announced during Tokyo Game Show. But this may be a point to show that Gematsu may come back with more interviews or bits of information around Tokyo Game Show over the next week or two as they're catching up. This is the former Atlas composer now working as a new making a new indie sci-fi RPG game, which, yeah, being a music composer and then jumping over to make a video game is pretty weird. Century Age of Ashes for the PS4 and PS5 launches September 26th. This looks like this is that dragon game. That's what I would speculate, is that you play as a dragon flying around. A open world action adventure game called Kaku Ancient Seals launches in 2023 for the PS5, PS4, and PC, which there might be something to this. There definitely was a game or two that they were kind of teasing a few years ago about characters that were kind of wearing these face masks, and I feel like those games probably did come out and then nobody paid any attention to them, or they just weren't that good. Um, Anytime you start to see like distinctly different cultures that aren't based on like an Asian Japanese culture or a medieval European culture, that piques my interest, but often it's done pretty badly. I'm having a hard time seeing if this guy's lips are sewn shut or not. Clearly this guy's lips aren't sewn shut. So it's hard to tell if this is a decoration or what. Let's see. It looks like it might just be a kind of survival action adventure thing, platformer adventure. Seems like you may not see any female characters in this culture because there's a decent number of shirtless men in the game. Although at a certain level, I would kind of appreciate if somebody said, hey, I'm just going to make a guy-on-guy gay game. Like, I'm going to put muscly, shirtless men all throughout the game as those characters. I'm going to put skinny, scrawny little cub characters and bears and twinks, and like some of these might be insult phrases these days, but just every kind of gay stereotypical character design you could think of. Just go with that. And as long as you did that somewhat carefully, you could probably make a game that would be alright. Now, the danger is if you were to say make a beat 'em up game where you spend 12 hours just beating up gay people, then people would be upset about that. So we're looking at this trailer. There's these little like pygmy warrior type creatures, and they seem to be kind of the bad guys. I thought they might be friends of this guy, and they're throwing spears all over the place. I don't know how you really play a game where spears are falling down near you, though. It doesn't really work. That's why even when somebody has like a bow and arrow, that you have to figure out ways to show that the arrow is targeting you and about to hit you before it actually hits. I'm not 100% sure that the character that we're following here is actually a male character. We may just be looking at a female underdeveloped breast. The dreadlocks and the hair would lead me to thinking it was potentially a female character. Yeah, this trailer is not really showing me much other than you're going to be this caveman character running for your life all the time, shoeless and running in lots of different places, platforming, trying to just survive and get resources. And you're gonna have your little flying pig friend. But the little lip art, whether that's your mouth being sewn shut or not, is not depicted in this trailer. So either that's something that happens later, or that is something else. Yeah. The thumbnail here, very different from what the trailer was showing. Different hair, different lip art, different headband, different necklace. So, yeah. There might be something to this game. I definitely don't hate it, but Could also just go off in a weird direction, being set in caveman time. There aren't really a lot of foundational caveman games where you play as a caveman. Even that movie Prey that was kind of a prequel to the Predator series, like that really is an idea that probably should have been played with in Predator 2 or Predator 3 instead of whatever 4 or 5 or 6 that in the series it actually is. And there are a couple of games where you play as cavemen, but they're older games, and they're usually just something like Bonk, or where you're platforming, and that's it. Moving on, the adventure game Shanghai Summer has been announced for PC, set in millennial Shanghai. Looks like it is probably going to be a visual novel, if I was to guess. They're calling it an adventure game. 40-second trailer. So you have a character, their faces are all scratched out. Looks like a visual novel to me. But apparently you can walk around, so that justifies calling it an adventure, I guess. Matsu. Alright, well, let's go through the games that came out on Steam. Smooth Operators 2. Looks like it's a Tiny Tower clone. I think in general, I would say no to Tiny Tower games. Spider Heck seems to be probably a player versus player game. Yeah. Or at least focused on player versus player. Spiders fighting each other. That's what it looks like it is. Neon spiders. The Dueled Chronicle, noticeably still mixed. Like, this Square Enix game definitely feels like it's just been shoved out to fail. And this may be the beginning of a situation where even the Japanese looking games from Square Enix are not going to get the level of support they deserve. Compared to Final Fantasy. Let's see. The actual gameplay loop of Dueled is pretty grim. It promises a unique take on tactics game, but when you actually get in it is pause-based combat akin to Baldur's Gate, with less complexity and less difficulty. This is not a new and fresh take. It's been around for decades in the character RPG world, and it was done better at the very first jump. The controls are mapped weird. You're constantly popped in and out of a pause when you don't want to be. Alright, so yeah. Sounds like the game plays pretty badly. But I'll put it on the follow list. I think just specifically because I want to see if maybe people turn around on it, but I doubt they will. Also, that deserves a YouTube short. I need to do some YouTube shorts. The Session Skate Sim, which seems to be out of early access now. Okay. In the last 30 days, you got about 67% positivity, where over its lifetime, it's 85% positivity. That very possibly means they've just said it's out of early access and abandoned it. For the record, I've had Session for years, more specifically since 05-ish. The reviews coming from the perspective of someone who's playing the game and following its development that long. Not everyone will like this. Now, Steam's thumb up and downs aren't enough to explain, blah blah blah. If you're looking for a full AAA skate clone, this is not quite there yet for many reasons. There's a lot to Session, but it does feel incomplete if you're looking. Here's a shorter review. Let's skip over this. No good, incomplete in my opinion. Game felt better and more responsive before it was released. Now it feels clunky and horrible to control. No idea what happened. I had high hopes for this game, but I guess I'm going back to Skater XL until Skate releases. So yeah, it strikes me as this has just been shoved out there. Alright. Flash Out is a bullet hell combat like F-Zero clone. There might be something to that. Wasn't really expecting to see this many good games. Frightened. This is probably nothing. There's no video here at all, which honestly they should force you to put a video. And there's no pictures of any actual characters or interactions. It's an early access game, and I think that's more than enough to say no. Requisition VR. Yeah, it's not really video game related, but apparently, as I understand it, and I'm not really paying a lot of attention to what's going on in Russia, they've effectively instituted something like a draft where they're trying to get as many people to be forced into the military for Russia to support the invasion of Ukraine and try and win the invasion of Ukraine. And now the people that are likely to get drafted are fairly upset. So that's probably a too long of a way to say that it seems like from the outside looking in there's a lot of turmoil and a lot of potential political upheaval going on in Russia, which might affect the number of like Russian games we see on Steam. That's the only way to even slightly connect it to video games. So this is a VR game that's focused on multiplayer. So almost certainly it's not going to work. Kind of like a Left 4 Dead clone. I had a really good daily PC game number of views yesterday, and I have no idea why that is the case. Like those videos are scheduled at the exact same time every day, and they look almost exactly the same. They don't have any title or description differences, so it really just seems like it is 100% around what is going to feel like randomness as to whether a YouTube short succeeds in the same way that YouTube videos seem to succeed under what feels like randomness. I know it's not really randomness. I know if YouTube is to be believed about how the system works, that they're picking a small percentage of people who are subscribed to my channel, of which there's not that many, and a small percentage of people who are just random and not subscribed to my channel, and then they are showing my videos, whether they're YouTube shorts or long form videos, to those people, and if they watch it and if they have a good watch time and if they put a thumbs up and interact with it, then it starts to suggest it to more people. So almost certainly yesterday's daily PC game got watched very early in its release, and that suggested it to more people. Now I'm really only talking about 100 people, so we still are miles away from the idea of getting like 10 million views and 1,000 subscribers to potentially monetize as a YouTube short creator in the new YouTube partner programs. There is also something around that new YouTube partner program where they didn't give exact numbers or exact rules to it, but there might be a point at some point in the future where I can just never put ads on my channel and get super thanks or something like that instead, and still be able to turn this massive effort that I put into this YouTube channel into something that would actually be financially profitable. This game camped out. I think it's too much of a multiplayer for me, but I will give it a YouTube short. Although at a certain level it does also kind of feel like you're doing too simplistic of actions over and over again for like a party game. Yeah, that definitely would be the ideal situation, or at least ideal compared to most of the other options. Patreon, in a lot of ways, is supposed to be the same idea. This has adult content. Elven Escape. But yeah, the general idea was with Patreon would be to cut YouTube out completely and just have people directly paying me and Patreon getting their 30% that way. This game, Elven Escape, is an adult top-down twin-stick shooter with a kind of pixely anime elf girl, and then there are adult cutscenes around it. It's English only, which is weird because it definitely feels like it would have been animated by a Japanese animator, because the animations in the cutscenes at least look good. Really, it's one of these games that feels like it is probably the game was made long after the adult cutscenes were made, and then the game and the character in the game is depicted, because now that I look at it, the little pixely version of the character has blonde hair, and the character in the cutscenes has a slight purplish gray hair. It's not blonde in any way. And I'm not really seeing ears on the character in the pixely version of the game. Notably, the anime style seems to be allowed just fine as long as the character is an elf and looks tall and is not in that moe art style in which they are depicted as being shorter and often taken for that to mean that they are younger. We are kind of spinning our wheels, definitely looking at the adult content games, because almost certainly none of them are actually going to make it to the fall list or the wish list. But it's still important to me to know what the state of the industry really is, as far as will it ever actually grow up and allow for adult content to exist on anything close to an equal footing or playing field. I mean, imagine if movies never allowed for adult movies to exist. If they were constantly censored. Or imagine if adult movies existed in Europe but were never allowed in the United States. How would that really hurt an industry, or how would that really hurt the art form or the medium for the art form? This Sinner 97 game doesn't look particularly good enough. Here we have Seeking Asylum Revelations, which first instinct is that this is an asset flip game, and just a bunch of 3D models, and then you get to first person shooting in what looks like asset flipped areas, and then you have floating people with swords. It's just like jumping between cutscenes and actual gameplay. Yeah, I think I can be extremely generous here and put this on the fall list, just to see if possibly there is actually something here that's good. I suspect the answer is no. the anime girl with guns concept seems to be crazy. Yeah, I really don't need to put this on the fall list, come to think of it. But yeah, I'll leave it there. It does just seem like it's getting crazier and crazier, and to the point where people are actually trying to make games, or trying to make things that look like games. And at a certain level, I guess we're probably getting to the point where they are starting to get good enough to make fake games look like real games to try to trick more people. But the 2 hours no questions asked policy, as far as refunds, seems like that would just always counter these fake games. That I guess they're just hoping that some percentage of people won't demand refunds. Here we have an interesting game. The Anointed David saves Kila, which, yeah, I don't recognize the name Kila from the Bible. In the past, almost every Bible game has either been a troll game or just a garbage game. This doesn't look amazingly good visually, but it does kind of feel like it's a step above most religious games I've seen before, most Christian games. Of course, we wouldn't consider something like Assassin's Creed an actual religious game. But yeah, also incredibly few numbers of adult games anyways get made, because it really is just a waste of time. You'll never convince the people that are so obsessed about Christianity in particular, or any religion, the hardcore dogmatic religious people are so obsessed about only studying and only spending their time studying their Bibles and their religion, that they would not let kids play games even if they were Christian games. They pretty much reject and hate anything in the earthly world, and there's just too high of a percentage of people in that group. Plus, you're not going to bring over anybody else. Your average Christian that just goes to church on Sundays and that's it, is not going to be interested in playing a Christian game. If anything, they're going to be more interested in playing fantasy games, or even going to something like Binding of Isaac, which is pretty much an anti-Christian game. And in part that's because Binding of Isaac is an actual good game that you can just ignore the imagery if you don't care about it. This Desert Revenant card game, it's probably nothing, but I'll give it a follow. 30 Days to Best looks like garbage. Here's another adult game. Now, notably, it's Friday again, and we're starting to see a little bit more adult games. And so Wednesday definitely seemed like there was a lack of adult games, but it's hardly also a point where I could say everything is just getting held till Friday when you're in the adult section. Although this game in particular doesn't really prove anything, because you have an anime girl not in the anime style, but she's still in the school uniform. So if the rule is you can't have anime girls in school uniforms, this one totally breaks that. She's in the school room. But then this also is labeled as coming soon, so maybe it never actually gets on Steam. And then this is just a terrible game. It's telling you immediately it's going to be a terrible game. It's just going to be one of those line games where you draw a box around things and it reveals the background. Yeah. And this isn't in the adult section, so I don't know if these images are even going to be adult related. They are implying that there's going to be nudity, but it may just be lewd outfits like this. So I'm not getting a full message. I need to basically wait until 6 months have passed of looking at all these games just to see how many of these games get listed as coming soon and never actually come out. Which honestly, it would make more sense to have a second fall list and just come back to those same games later on, 6 months down the line. Slayer Cat here is a game. It's probably a little too zoomed in for a run and gunner with platforming, which you tend not to have a lot of run and gunning for platforming, but I'm gonna give this a follow. It might have something interesting there. Bad Way looks like it's trying to be an Uncharted clone, very much, and that's probably garbage, but I'll give it a follow. I'm running out of room here as far as tabs. Score Gun we can say no to. Tower of Darkness I think we can say no to. BLR80 we can say no to. Arizona Derby might be something, so we'll give that a follow. 6 3D Metaverse. Well, pretty much a no to anything that says Metaverse, and each of these screenshots feel like they are from completely different games. Peak Climb VR. I'll give that a follow as a VR game. Although I really don't know if I really want to play a VR game that is around causing vertigo and causing people to have fear of heights reactions. Imaginary Circle says it's a hidden object game. What do you do? That's about an hour and a half in which you must find your way around an abandoned prison for $4.49. That price is way too high. I'll give it a follow though. Although I don't think I need to give it a YouTube short. This feels like this is too pink of a color. Though maybe we'll try that too. Just try everything. Next game is another 3D model adult game, which noticeably the percentage of anime flat 2D style characters has been higher so far and compared to 3D model adult games. This game called Honey Magician barely has 5 screenshots around it, and it's a Chinese game, so I don't know if there really is any adult content. The game contains dangerous magic performances. Non-professional magicians should not imitate. In reality, the game contains bondage binding, I suppose, and breast shaking, not suitable for young players. So this isn't actually an adult game by most people's standards. It is a Chinese game trying to look like an adult game. So they tie up this magician lady and then they just pose in these static images. And then I guess at some point you're going to try and throw a ring around her. Which, yeah. Talk about a garbage game. I mean, at a certain level, this is probably the most interesting you could ever make a ring toss game. But it's still really just garbage. Let's see. DreamWorks Dragons Legends of the Nine Realms. Why has nobody talked about this game? Is this something that had already been released on other consoles or a PC? Seems really weird that you'd have a DreamWorks game, DreamWorks Dragons. Yeah, this must be based on a movie that must have come out on other platforms many years ago. And that would be the only explanation as to why somebody wouldn't have put out at least a press memo. Ancient Witch Arena Prologue here seems to be probably a cheap Chinese, if I was to guess, top-down hack and slash game fighting a bunch of different monsters. It's just a prologue anyways, but in the prologue I'm not seeing anything that's super interesting. The idea of a bunch of enemies on screen for a top-down hack and slasher isn't a terrible thought, but that potentially zooms out the characters so much that they just turn into numbers and weird blobs of color. Let's see, Alien War looks like it's just a side-scroll shooter. Bone Mayhem doesn't look like anything of interest. Prison Life. Yeah, I think at this point I don't see any reason why I'd ever want to even think about being in prison. Like, maybe I'm getting old at this point, but even entertaining the thought sounds unfun. Well, and then once again we have a game here that's tagged as a word game that has some anime characters in it. $2.09, bunch of languages it says it supports. As far as actual adult content description, there is none, and it's not in the adult section. So you have girls in their underwear, and that's probably all you're going to see. So yeah, we're running into this situation where it feels like there definitely is some censorship going on, particularly on these low effort Asian games. Either they are censoring themselves because they don't have the actual art to show as far as nude images, or they're censoring themselves because Steam told them they had to. Steam is censoring them effectively. This Cross Concerto, I don't know if this supports English. This looks like this is potentially an actually good visual novel. I don't think any of the description here is going to be in English, so we can't really get anything more than that. Notably, you are seeing anime girls in school outfits in this one, but that's not a big deal because this is not an adult game. Yeah, I assume this is a visual novel. I suppose it's worth also mentioning that, and keeping it in the back of my mind, that since there are censorship laws in Japan also, it might be that some of the games are being censored just because of the censorship laws in Japan. But the censorship laws in Japan don't really line up that way if that was the case, because then we would be seeing a lot of naked breasts, which don't have to be censored at all under Japanese laws, and we would just be seeing a lot of censored genitalia, lower half. So we would have a bunch of softcore games if it was just following the Japanese laws, which I think more often than you would realize, most of these adult games probably are pretty softcore. That's something that would have been the case like a decade or two ago, where you would have some PC Engine adult game that has the bottom half blurred. Like, even the Japanese are pushing towards changing the laws there and getting rid of the blurring. Well, this game Rumble doesn't look like anything of interest. I'd almost live for the days of blurring. Blurring is obvious. Censorship when things are completely removed or not allowed on the storefront in the first place. That's a lot harder to track down and prove. This game's shade light is probably nothing, but I'll give it a follow. I have like 3 more tabs before I run out of tab space. And we seem to have quite a lot of games still. Nope, actually we only have 2 games left. Cat-a-Tear, gambling with cats. No, I don't think this is quite good enough. Like if you were going to make a solitaire game and it was going to be cat themed, I think there needs to be some kind of background image, or at least something other than pure white. The backs of cards needs to be colorful to look at. Yeah, I don't think that quite gets to a good solitaire game. And there's Underground Man 2, I'll give a follow. Although, I'm putting a lot of things on the fall list when it says coming soon. And that may very well be a mistake. Let's see. GameDeveloper.com's articles here says TheroCraft has netted $50 million and hired the former League of Legends game director. TheroCraft was formed last year by industry veterans from Blizzard, Bungie, Riot Games, and Valve. Which, okay, cool. I look forward to them having something to really announce. GameDeveloper.com also says Video Game Donkey is actually launching a game publishing company, and I kind of tend to believe him. The Gearbox's CEO, which is, I guess is still Randy Pitchford, told Embracer Group investors that Borderlands Tiny Tina's Wonderlands shattered expectations, which, yeah. Of course, the problem is Randy Pitchford is kind of known for being a liar. More than most in the video game world, so him showing up in front of investors to say anything is probably a bad thing. It's kind of ridiculous he's still involved with Gearbox at all. Here's that story we started with today. Ninja Theory and other AAA developers are reportedly using AI voice acting tech over people. Instead of professional voice actors, Ninja Theory and Neon Giant have allegedly opted to use AI voice acting in their games. We're definitely going to get to that point, and Disney is definitely working towards it not just being AI voice. Like, they have stuff in the works for 10, 15 years from now, where they're going to have animations that look 100% realistic and totally don't require any kinds of actors at all. And that is almost certainly the next step that Disney wants to take. Right now they're hiring actors and actresses to play characters in live action versions of a lot of their Disney movies, or they're doing CG to remake like The Lion King in a more realistic style. But the next step is that they are going to try and do remakes upon remakes, and it's going to try and get further and further away from being something that we would call a cel shaded flat Disney animation and closer to impossible to really tell if it was a real actor CGI type animation. But inherently also Disney has no ideas, and that's why they are just remaking all of their old movies. They're not coming out with anything new, and they've fired their animators who could have given them some creative ideas. Replaced them with cheap foreign workers. We already talked about this. Satya Nadella is still very confident in the Activision deal succeeding. And we already talked about Cyberpunk 2077 reaching 1 million daily players. And it is so ridiculous that I don't even know the name of this character. That I might as well just call her Cyberpunk, Miss Cyberpunk, for as little as I know. Valve has rethinked the Steam stats with a new real-time and weekly Steam charts. Valve said the overhaul will provide a better overview on what's hot on Steam right now. Maybe I will start to look more in depth on these Steam charts and stats, but I think my way of looking at everything shows me everything, whereas if I was to start to use charts and stats, I would start to just only try to look at the top 10% of games, and I don't think that works for what I'm trying to do at this point. But it is nice to see Steam doing anything and not just kind of disappearing behind a wall of secrecy. And then we already talked about Apex Legends developers being upset about its workers being harassed, which I don't think means much of anything to me. Here we have a flawless cleanup game called Uninvited Guest, which is mostly positive at 77%, so that can go on the wish list. Even though it doesn't look particularly interesting, it's probably just a horror walking simulator game. Sometime next week, I almost certainly will run out of XYZ style games on the fall list and have to wrap around to whatever the first letter A game is. This game, Uninvited, is also passing the rules, as it were. 82% positive with 46 reviews, which makes it relevant, so that goes to the wish list. Unichrome 1-bit adventure needs more time. Unheard is from February 18th, 2021, and it has like 6 reviews and it's teetering around 50%, so that can leave the fall list. Unfolded Camellia Tales. I like this different visual art style. Honestly, if this is what you can draw, you should just draw this. It's not terrible, even for a game. I'm going to give this more time, even though it's probably not going to get any more reviews, and I probably am just going to have to make a decision as to whether I want to say yes or no to it. Unexplored 2, The Wayfarer's Legacy. Mostly positive. Single player. I guess we put that on the wish list. Then I'd have to see if I can find Unexplored 1. Yeah. Then Unexplored 1 is also on the wish list. This really doesn't look like a game that I would put a high priority on purchasing, though. So the visuals in the first game might kill my interest in playing the second game. Undying Lantern needs more time. Undying is still early access from October 2021. It's like a zombie game where you're taking care of your kid while being potentially infected. And that sounds really interesting. So I hope it actually comes out of early access at some point so I can actually play it, because I'm still definitely holding a strict rule of not playing early access games. I only want to play finished games. And that's in part certainly something that colors my my criticism of video games when I play something that claims to be finished, like Darksiders 3, and then you start to see some places where, yeah, there could have been more content added. This Undungeon, mostly positive, with well over 30 reviews, so that'll go to the wish list. Yeah, I definitely am starting to feel that I need to probably buy a little bit around Black Friday this year. You can't just buy nothing. But also, I don't know how many games I'm going to really play. I think this one could leave the fall list just because there's nobody's reviewed it. It doesn't really look like much of a game anyways. Underground Man needs more time. The Shade Light, interesting. Is this one I just put on the fall list? Yeah, I'm going backwards now in tabs. I don't have any further ones, I think, to look at. Let me just hit Control Tab just to see if it wraps around, and it did. Yeah. Yeah, it's a weird position certainly to be in, to buy games and not be certain you're even going to play them in a year, just to try to maintain a level of growth in your Steam collection. It's kind of a dumb idea in a lot of ways, but I kind of feel like I need it. Also, perhaps I'm starting to get a little bit better about playing games after having a pretty rough year with my computer having trouble and me just being distracted on a lot of side projects. There's a ton of side projects. Here's one picture, I guess, of the character Lucy. I think this is the character Lucy in Cyberpunk 2077 Edgerunners, and pretty much anybody, almost all the fan art I've seen has been lewd or nude fan art of this character, and unfortunately not enough lewd or nude imagery of this character, who is like, they should probably try and balance it out a little bit. Apparently you can now save a song you hear in a YouTube short, allowing you to revisit the song later on YouTube or YouTube Music in a playlist called Sounds from Shorts, which that is something that would make YouTube Shorts compete, I think, against TikTok. At the beginning of the stream, it was rumored, and I guess it's now been kind of confirmed by GameDeveloper.com, that potentially the Rockstar Games hacker has been possibly identified and arrested by London police. That's the rumor. It probably should just be a rumor. I don't even think I would give credibility to videogames.com, or GameDeveloper.com actually was the source there, because I don't think they're really investigating anything any more than Nebel was when he said it like two and a half hours ago. I'm scrolling down my Twitter feed, just seeing if there's any other news worth talking about for this Friday's show, and then we'll be done. One of the things I will say about my current sleep schedule, which is a very normal, like waking up at about 8 in the morning, going to bed about 10 in the evening sleep schedule. One of the things about it, though, is that there is this point around 8 or 9 in the evening when I start to feel a little sleepy, a little low energy. Whereas my insomnia often has the exact opposite effect. I feel fairly sleepy when I usually wake up, and then I feel at my highest point of energized when I should be trying to go to sleep. So I'm just unfamiliar with what a normal circadian rhythm and a normal sleep cycle even is. But it's kind of annoying, I will say, because last night I wanted to potentially play one more hour's worth of Darksiders 3, and I just didn't get to it. I didn't even mention that at one point in Darksiders 3 there's literally a texture that didn't load in, and nothing I did short of potentially exiting the game and reloading changed the fact that the texture didn't load in. And music seems to never really play for that long, and I wonder if that's a case where the music engine is just crashing very silently after a few minutes. Because, yeah, you get these little musical cues, but they never try to play a full song, which feels weird. There is something specific about the Darksiders series, because I've seen it in Darksiders 1 and 2 also, where the music engine, or the part of the music engine, can crash without it crashing other parts. It may just simply be that they have a standard of programming in which they never trigger a panic, a kernel panic, or any kind of alarm or crash scenario. Or it may be something specific about the engine in the Darksiders series, which I wouldn't be surprised if the Darksiders series actually would be a lot better if it was programmed on like the Unreal Engine and just remade. And sadly, that is going to be the gigantic trick that they'll have to try and pull off, is that they will have to try to immediately remaster and release the Darksiders series as soon as they release the final Darksiders 4th game, because it's just been so long since the first game. This game that I'm keeping an eye on, that was reported to the owners and is stealing Shift Up's art and imagery from Destiny Child, and I feel no legal threat in saying they literally stole the art, is still on Steam. So yeah, it does seem like you can get away with quite a bit on Steam as far as having stolen art and assets, and it not getting taken down when flagged, and it not getting taken down. Here's Spider-Man Miles Morales, which we'll just put that on the follow list. So if there was any worry that the Spider-Man Miles Morales game, the sequel to the first Spider-Man game, or if there was any fear that this version of the game was not coming. I assume Miles Morales is not just the exact same story as the first game, with you playing as Miles Morales instead of Peter Parker. That would be ridiculous. Apparently it's National Donate Day or something, or Texas Donate, something like that. And so it's NorthTexasGivingDay.org is the website. And so you can donate to the National Video Game Museum, which is in Frisco, Texas. That is in North Texas. They are trying to raise money for outreach programs and scholarships, funds that will benefit children who are interested in pursuing a career in video game and technology industries. So they're not even really looking to raise money to support their own things. A lot of broken images here. At a certain level, though, I wouldn't be surprised if any museum / charity can do pretty much whatever they want with donations without any real oversight, but I also don't want to imply some kind of weird speculation that I don't believe is true, that the National Video Game Museum is misappropriating funds. I think they're probably doing a fairly decent job, and I still plan to eventually donate my entire Nintendo collection to the National Video Game Museum at some point in the future. Probably should be closer to now than then, or sooner than later, I guess is the way normal people would say that. Yeah. And here's the post as far as the charts and statistics being updated on Steam. Oh, also the Streamies, the YouTube Stream Awards, is coming back for the first time since 2019, and it's going to be in first person on December 4th. I imagine this is just an opportunity for YouTube to give awards to their favorite people. And that's pretty much it. Okay. Should be moving faster to wrap up today. I don't think that there's going to be any other news worth talking about, so should be, I imagine, a fairly slow weekend. Notably, we did see a lot of non-adult anime games this Friday, but we didn't see, actually, I think, a single actual adult one. But then we didn't see much of anything, so the numbers on those, the statistics on that seem to be very weird and all over the place. As far as Yu-Gi-Oh, yeah, we made enough progress. If I get bored, I could see myself playing a little bit over the weekend, but I could also see myself simply ignoring that. And just now, the daily quests are all rolling over, so a duel live needs to happen, but I'll do that off screen. There's no reason really to ever show the duel lives, but I do it just because. Alright, well, that's going to be it for this stream. As always, I ask you to like, share, subscribe, comment, and watch every second of my videos, because YouTube wants all of that. If you want a friend or follow me on any social media sites, there's a bunch of links down below. There's also a link to Patreon, or you can friend me on Steam and get me a game off my wishlist to support me further. Thank you for watching. Have a good evening.